I'm Mark Gagan, and you're listening to a special episode of the Voice of Insurance podcast. Today's guest is one of the most remarkable and exceptional people I've had on the show. Guillaume Bonnissent is the CEO of Quotech, a business he founded just over 4 years ago. With over 20 years in underwriting, Guillaume can post one of the most eclectic resumés of any of his peers. He's written almost every class going, via almost every distribution channel in the insurance value chain, spanning specialist insurance, treaty reinsurance, portfolio underwriting, and an MGA. This gives him a unique perspective on the needs of underwriters of all shapes and sizes, and indeed brokers too. But the really remarkable bit is that he's always been a technologist. He learned coding as part of a business degree and has kept his skills up to date. This meant that when in his last role he was looking for some software that it turned out didn't exist, he was able to write a prototype version of what he needed himself. The tool worked, and he quickly saw the potential for a new software business, and Quotech was born. It's a remarkable story which is really all about giving teams everything they need to do their jobs better. It's also a very rare story of software made by an underwriter for underwriters. In this podcast, we'll certainly learn all about Guillaume's original inventions, which are being adopted by some very influential market businesses. But we'll also have a really deep and far-ranging discussion about the long-term consequences of digitalisation and artificial intelligence on the insurance value chain. Guillaume is a real London Market original, and I found it really easy and fun to talk to him. Listen on, and I think you'll find it as enlightening and enjoyable as I did. Enjoy the podcast. Guillaume, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
For anyone who doesn't know you, why don't you give us a brief introduction to yourself and to Quotech?
Yes, so my name is Guillaume Bonnissent. I've been in the London insurance market for 24 years, despite my accent. I've always lived in London.
Where is that accent from, Guillaume?
Well, it's not Belgium, it's not Switzerland, it's France, as I think everyone would have guessed. I started my career as a credit underwriter at Euler Hermes, and then I moved to Hiscox, where I spent 14 years in lots of different roles, both in operation and underwriting.
What classes did you write there?
A bit of everything. I started with high-value household. I then moved to kidnap and ransom. I did personal accident, reinsurance treaty, a bit of liability, and then my last role was to underwrite portfolios.
So you've done everything, really?
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Definitely my underwriting career.
Sounds like my broking career, yes.
And then I moved to White Oak, where White Oak is a large MGA, London-based. I spent 4 years there, and I was the underwriting director. So I was running it, and White Oak was doing transportation, extended warranty, and then I introduced other specialty lines of business that I really like. I wanted to diversify the portfolio.
So what gave you the idea for Quotech?
Frustration. You know, it's always, I think, a lot of business starts from frustration when you can't find what you have.
Would you say you're a technologist or you're an underwriter wanting to have better technology?
Yeah, I think it's more that. I've always been very keen on tech, but not tech for the sake of tech. I was always keen on tech as a solution to solve problems. And that was always the case throughout my career. My favorite thing was going to a line of business that was not performing very well, both from an underwriting point of view and an operational point of view, and sorting both out. So introducing a basic actuarial method, improving the pricing, looking at distribution, and also looking at the processes to make sure that every data point was recorded, etc. And it's during that time when I was trying to do that at White Oak that I really grew frustrated by the lack of technology solutions to do that. So we were finding a lot of third-party data to enrich the application form we were getting from the policyholders, but we had no systems to collect all of that, analyze it, etc. So I looked and looked, couldn't find the solution, and that's where Quotech was born.
So you went off and built your own tool to solve the problem?
Yes, basically. When you study business in France, for some reason that I really don't know, you learn coding, and I always kept it up.
Well, chapeau to the French education system. So you coded it yourself?
The first one, yes. So maybe it's because I couldn't express it in a way that people understood. When I was explaining what I wanted, people looked at me blankly and were like, well, are you looking for a policy admin system? Are you looking for a claims admin system? It's like, no. I'm looking for this. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to build a kind of prototype to show them.
Yes, if they can't understand what you're saying, then you have to just do it and say, look at this is what I mean.
Exactly. And then I started showing it to people and say, okay, can you tell me, is there something kind of like that I can buy somewhere? And they said no. But the feedback from all my friends in the market was like, well, actually, I think you've got something there. Why don't you start your own company?
And so you did?
Yes, I did. 3 months before lockdown, 3 months before the world imploded, but I really don't regret it.
Well, actually, the same as me. 3 months before lockdown, I thought I'd better do a podcast because no one else was doing one. I didn't think. So yes, we're on the same sort of timeline. What's the main product? So the thing that people didn't understand until you built it, is that your star product?
So yes, our star product is what we call risk. And it's the idea of allowing underwriters to do all of their job in one place. So the idea is 80% of the time they spend on a platform should be spent on that. And a lot of the tasks that should be automated are automated. So the concept is quite simple. I like to describe us as a kind of doctor for front office team. And the reason for it is because our sales process is a bit like a therapy session where people come to us, they've got pain points, and we discuss the shared pain points that we had. And then we discuss how we can solve them. And sometimes, which is one of the most satisfying things, is when clients come to us and they kind of say, you solve a pain points we didn't even know we had. You know, we had that chronic pain that we just lived with for the last 20 years. But we didn't even know that could be solved because you get used to it and the way things are. So this is what, in a very metaphorical way, we like to do.
So if it was in a box, what would you call it? Would you say it was an underwriting workbench or something? Is that the word you'd use these days?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the workbench. But it's more than that because it's looking at, through different modules, all of the processes that an underwriting team will be involved with. What I like to call it is the source of the truth. I think one of the problems in insurance is you've got so many different softwares. Each function has a different software, and these softwares don't talk to each other, which means that you end up having different source of truth. So, for instance, in my previous employer, there was a policy admin system and there was a claim system. And then we realized that there was a non-negligible percentage of claims that we paid because the TPAs that were assessing the losses didn't have access to the policy information system because they were on two different systems.
A TPA is a third-party administrator.
Sorry, yes. You warned me about acronyms.
No, it's all good. No, it is my job. Otherwise, I'd have to apologise to all the listeners and put it in the back of the notes. So we might as well deal with them as they arise. Yep. So it's more the glue that holds everything together. Is that what you'd say? Absolutely.
And it's about targeting teams. That's really what makes the difference for us. We don't target large organization, we target teams, so we can offer them a solution that is very tailored to their needs. That also means that our smallest client is a 2-man MGA, and our largest client is a broker with 15,000 employees worldwide. And that's because we've targeted a team. If you think about all of the insurance organization, they will have teams of maybe 5 to 15 people who will do like one specific line of business. There may be several insurance products within that.
There's never more than 15 people doing the same sort of thing.
Absolutely. So you can offer a solution that is very tailored to them. And that also means because we've got a modular approach, if they're part of a large organization, they will have accounting software. They will have maybe a software to produce documentation. So we don't need to offer them these modules. We just offer them the main modules that they require, and that will fit in within all the rest. For a small organization, we are their IT platform. We are the only platform they want to use. So then they buy more modules.
So yes, you buy the bits that you need, but it's not totally bespoke. There is a bespoke set of modules that you can pick, like a big Lego box that you could pretty much build any kind of spaceship you want.
Absolutely. And it comes back to the really funny thing of like, why has no one else done it before? And, you know, my experience, as I said before, is I've underwritten quite a few different lines of business. Every time you meet an underwriting team, they will tell you that their line of business is totally different from every other line of business. They will also tell you that the way they underwrite it is totally different from all of their peers. Now, most of that is true maybe 1% of the time. You know, even marine is very different from, let's say, aviation or property. But it's still the same thing. You're still recording data in a very similar fashion. You're still charging premium. You still have limits of indemnity. You still have brokerage commission. So actually, I would say the customization of our platform per client is about 5%. All the rest is very similar for everyone. But to them, it looks unique because it totally answers all their needs.
Just to really summarize what you do, sometimes it's better to frame it and to say what problems you're solving. So is the big problem that you're solving this lack of communication between different systems, or the lack of coordination between all the parts of an insurance business and what it does?
Partly, and this is the bit that's really interesting, because we started by saying we're going to solve the problem of recording all the data about submissions, quotes, and policies, and also by integrating third-party data into it, so allowing the enrichment of data. And that was one of the things we solved, but actually asking feedback from our clients, some of the things they prefer on our platform is the fact that because everything is in one place, we were able to put great underwriting controls, which means that they can't overbreach the underwriting authorities. There are a lot of workflows between different underwriters, between different members of the team. So it's all that automation and control that actually our clients really, really like and that they haven't found anywhere else. And the reason also why they haven't found anywhere else is because every other system wasn't designed by an ex-underwriter. So to me, when I designed it, it was obvious. Let's put some underwriting control. Let's put some compliance control. But I didn't put that as the main thing. It was just, to me, very natural to add them because...
You know you're going to need it.
Exactly. But actually, going back to our clients, that's their main feedback. That's what they told us they really like about the platform is a single source of the truth where everything is so controlled that they don't waste time with going through underwriting audits because they can just tell the auditors, here you go, everything's there and I cannot breach any authority.
I think you've already said that this is a universal system. There's not any particular class of business that you're really strong in. You to say, oh, this is a great aviation system. It's fantastic for marine or non-marine or whatever. But also, you've already said it's not just an underwriting system. This is also being used by a broker. Certainly, in my experience of speaking to people who provide technology to the insurance industry, that seems to be the big dividing line. You know, which side of the underwriting box are you working for? And sort of never the twain shall meet. You know, it's policy admin, and obviously, so a broker doesn't need that. Why have you gone sort of both ways?
It's really interesting. And that's really like all the thesis of my system is all about looking at the distribution channel and looking at all the different ways that could work. And there's so many gray areas. You can have an MGA that belongs to a broking house. You can have an MGA that belongs to an insurer. You can have an independent MGA. And then who produces the paperwork? Sometimes it's the broker, sometimes it's the MGA, sometimes it's the insurer. How many brokers do you have in the chain? I mean, you can have a super long distribution chain, or you can have a very short one where I don't know how you buy your car insurance, but I go directly to the insurer. So it's too simplistic in a way, and you will make designing the technology super simple to say, okay, you're a broker, therefore you do that. You're an MGA, therefore you do that. You're an insurer, therefore you do that. But actually, in most cases, our clients have very blurred line about what they do and what they don't do. And even for the same client, we've got some MGA clients who sometimes on some lines of business produce the paperwork. Sometimes they don't, or sometimes they will produce it, but for this particular broker, they will let them produce it. So do you see what I mean? There is a very gray area to say like, okay, you're a broker, then you need to buy a broking platform. You will do everything you need.
Broker 2000.
Broker 2000, you know, it's full of AI and blockchain and all the things that you don't know what they are, but you know you really want. And then the broker will say, okay, that's fantastic. But what happened in the case where I don't produce the paperwork and the MGA is like, oh, okay, well, we can't really
We don't have a
that.
module for that yet.
And what about in the case where actually I'm acting as an MGA because I've got a line slip or I've got a binding authority from capacity providers? Like, oh no, we can't do that.
You're right. The world is actually a lot more blurred, particularly, I suppose, you've been an underwriting on your own balance sheet, but also having been at White Oaks, you're an intermediary of a different kind, obviously mostly an agent.
Absolutely.
But sometimes a broker within that situation as well. And obviously brokers are sometimes underwriters as well because they sometimes have binding authority within certain parameters. So yes, I get it. The other thing is data, isn't it? That you're bringing in lots of different data sources, but I think under certain circumstances, you're actually providing that data as well.
Yes, it's always been something that I really like. It's finding new sources of data, and especially sources of data that were not created for the insurance industry, but actually could be really useful for
and
insurance.
you're sort of running them up against other data sources and seeing correlations that no one else can see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the best example that I could think of was everyone talks about dynamic underwriting. We need to move to dynamic underwriting. And I never really quite understood what they meant, because the policies, generally most of them annual or long term, you can't really vary the price. What you can do is manage your portfolio dynamically. That's what I always thought was much more interesting from a London market point of view, when we think of all the specialty lines. And when we think of managing portfolio, we tend to look in the past. So we look like, okay, how many hurricanes have there been in, the US? And we model that, and that gives us a prediction that we know it's going to be wrong, and we're going to have to buy a new model when there's a new hurricane. But we continue on doing that. What we don't have up until this point was something that was a reliable source of things happening. There's been an earthquake happening. There's been a tornado. There's been a wildfire happen 8 minutes ago, and this is the impact on my portfolio. And actually, I came across something called the Disaster Aware Enterprise, and it's data that comes from the Pacific Disaster Center. The Pacific Disaster Center, you can look it up online. I won't bore you with all the details, but they're federally funded. That is the source of data.
So US federal?
US federal funded, yeah. So that is the source of data that the US president, for instance, is using to know of any disaster happening around the world.
So not just the Pacific?
Not just the Pacific. So it was started following a large hurricane that destroyed a Hawaiian island in the 90s. And it was the Pacific Disaster Center, also known as PDC, is attached to the University of Hawaii. And its role was to monitor any event that would happen to the Hawaiian Islands. It became so successful because, as you can imagine, if you tell PhDs, oh, you're going to be based in Hawaii, paid by the federal government, I think
that's not bad, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of many better jobs, frankly. So they monitor all natural catastrophes, all man-made events, pandemics as well, across the world. They've got access to military-graded data, including data from NASA that no private company can have access to. And they started selling that data to private companies about 7 years ago because of the like of Facebook, Citrix, Mattel, Amazon forcing them to sell it. And so what you've got there is an early warning system that will tell you there is a wildfire that's likely to happen, or a wildfire has happened, or a tornado has happened. But this was not done for insurance. So it moved from being done to warn the US government, the UN, 67 UN countries, NGOs, so non-governmental organizations.
Yep.
But then it was done to warn risk managers. And risk managers care about all the perils that can affect all their properties. Now, we looked at that and we were like, this is amazing. We can implement that in insurance, but obviously we need to adapt it. And that comes back to, we love finding data, not targeted insurance that we can adapt. Why do we need to adapt it? Well, first of all, every asset that you insure in insurance may not be insured against all the perils that can affect that property. The second thing is a portfolio of, say, property, for instance, that an insurer will insure, will move every day because there will be properties coming on, properties coming off. So you need to have a system that can do that.
Because some of it literally moves because it's a ship or an airplane or something.
Exactly. So and then you've got the moving asset, as you said, which makes it even more interesting. So these are exactly the kind of data that we found that doesn't exist in insurance and that people don't even know they want till we show it to them. And they're like, actually, this could be really useful.
So you've taken this, so the data feed to end all data feeds of every bad thing that could happen in the world, but you're making it relevant to insurance and saying, well, we don't have to worry about this because no one ever insures that part. Well, we can make it relevant to your portfolio specifically.
Exactly. So that's where we came also to the creation of our exposure module, which we call QEX. And the idea is we were selling that data to insurers. One of our clients is Convex. And they said, well, this is great. And we can bring it through electronically so it can update. But they didn't have a platform where they could have their current exposure and then bringing that data, because the platform they were using where they have their current exposure didn't take what is known as APIs, so ingestion of electronic data. So we started inquiring about it. And that's where, what I was talking about, the therapy session came in, because they told us, well, not only can you not do that, but it's super slow. And I was like, come on, it can't be that slow. And then it is slow. We looked at it. There was a limited number of locations you could see on the map. So they started giving us the full list of issues.
That's a really interesting example, because this is a legacy-free insurer that's pretty new.
Oh, absolutely.
So if it's slow for convicts, imagine how slow it's going to be for someone who's been around and has also the product of 15 to 20 different bits of M&A with different goodness knows what's going on systems in the background.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what convicts they find incredibly frustrating is they are ready to adopt the top technology, and they've done that in other areas.
So you've been able to make something live and relevant to a property underwriter and say, look, this is going to affect that property. Well, we're pretty certain in the vicinity of XYZ million values, you have this happening.
Absolutely.
And they can see straight away.
Yeah. And it's, you wake up in the morning, analyst meeting, if you're the CEO, or someone is asking you the question, or you want to know what is a loss. And it could be events you didn't even know happened, that you would only know about them once you receive the loss notification.
You can now get on top of the broker and say, well, hang on a minute, you haven't told me about this yet. We haven't even woken up yet. We didn't know it happened yet.
Absolutely. And I always remember when I was at Hiscox, every time there was a hurricane, because you could do that with a hurricane, because you can see them, they move quite slowly. So there was a hurricane that was just starting forming. And we had that chap coming from the top floor where all the execs were in the CEO office. And he was coming to us and say, okay, tell me your estimated loss for this new hurricane. Now, the property guys were going through their spreadsheets and I was underwriting the accident and health account at the time. So that was personal accident. So I had absolutely no idea.
Well, it depends where my people are.
Exactly.
I can phone them all up and ask them where you are.
I mean, even if I had trackers, that would be like, okay, how do I predict the future that the guy we insure for 50 million is going to be in...
He decided to stay and ride
exactly.
out the storm instead of leaving like everybody else did.
Exactly. So obviously, even with our current exposure module, we won't be able to monitor people, but we can for all the other perils and all the other assets.
And can you build that into sort of outwards reinsurance as well to say what's our net position?
Absolutely. And that was one of the pain points, is the fact that the current system they have only tell them their total insured value. It doesn't even tell them their exposure, and it doesn't tell them their net exposure. So again, that's something that we've implemented, as well as using the Oasis Open Exposure Data Standard, which means that we're using a data standard that's open source, so a lot of our clients can use it.
It seems that you're at the cutting edge of exposure management and everything else. That boardroom scenario saying, I've seen a tropical disturbance. Can you tell me what would happen if it hit Miami? Or tell me what track you think it's on and what that's going to cost us, whether we should go into the live cat market now and buy some extra reinsurance. How far do you think this could go in 10 years? How efficient and how real time could we be?
I think it's very hard to tell that. I think what's really interesting is looking at what technology exists today that then is going to be adopted by the insurance industry over 10 or 20 years. Because it's always the same, right? You've got some like really cool things that happen, but it will take time for the insurance industry to adopt them. So one of the things that we're working on right now, for instance, is there's some companies that do that through artificial intelligence. They can analyze a satellite imagery of a property and tell you the state of that property pre-event and post-event. So again, the next step is not only will you know that there is something likely to have affected your portfolio, but you could actually have something that tells you what is the quantum or the very likely quantum, even before you've got loss adjusters coming on the ground and reviewing the state of the property that you insure, for instance. And that's highly relevant when you think of wildfires and tornado, because as you know, wildfire and tornadoes, you can be on one side of the track and it's a total loss, and you can be on the other side and literally no damage.
Because the northeastern quadrant is worse than the other.
Exactly.
It's interesting you're saying about the sort of late adoption, or it takes time for new technology to then filter through into insurance because, of course, it wasn't necessarily the first application of that technology. So Do you think there'll be a time you go back to your personal accident underwriting days when you're saying, I don't know where all my people are that I've in my portfolio. But of course, now you can find your iPhone or your Android phone. You'll be finding your people. If you've given you permission to be tracked, you could say, by the way, you probably want to leave Miami because a hurricane's coming and we know it's going to be quite bad. In fact, you could be in physical danger. So we do advise you as your underwriters to get out of town.
That's something that through that data from disaster-aware enterprise, we're trying to tell insurers and brokers that you could give access to your clients to that early warning system, because in effect, it is an early warning system that allows you to mitigate the risk. I think when it comes to get the access to data, I think the technology is there. The main blocker, which I think, in most cases is a good thing, is the regulator. It's a bit like artificial intelligence. You could get a lot of data on people. The technology is there to know exactly where all of your insurers would be. But thankfully, the regulator is stopping you from having that data.
I guess if we take that personal accident analogy even further, it would be, well, Mark, stop. You're about to get run over by a car.
Yeah.
That'd be very helpful. I'd still be slightly annoyed that my insurer knew that much about where I was and what I was doing to say that, yes, I probably need to look to the right because a truck is about to run me over. I mean, obviously be very grateful that I hadn't been run over, but I would be slightly freaked out that they knew that much about exactly where I was and what was happening.
It becomes Big Brother as opposed to insurance.
Yes, well, you mentioned artificial intelligence. I think it's one of the things that we've been talking about. Podcast is about talking, and obviously we've spent a lot of time talking about your business, but we want to throw in the kind of topics du jour.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe 2 years ago, we'd have been talking about ESG, and we sort of had to throw in a question about ESG. I think this year, we've got to have a question about AI. How far do you think it's going to get embedded into the underwriting value chain, the whole insurance value chain and the underwriting process specifically?
I think a lot, and I'm very keen on AI as long as any other technology it solves a problem. I think the issue that we have, and that was exactly what we had with blockchain, was the idea that, this technology is going to solve all our issues. But no one said which issue it was going to solve. It didn't have
a problem to solve, did it?
Exactly. And also, even the problems that were mentioned could be solved in a much easier and better way by other solutions. So to give you an example, we've adopted AI for some of our products, like on the data. So the proof of concept was on US directors and officer insurance. So US listed companies for directors and officer insurance. And the reason why I chose this line of business was because it was the only line of business I could think of where all the data you require to underwrite it is available publicly.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of D&O, but not enough. So I spoke to a lot of ex-colleagues and D&O underwriters.
Because who actually reads all thousands of pages of the report?
Exactly.
Or really understands them, or has enough queries. So, I mean, I suppose the acid test would be on a back test. Could it pick out Enron and page 1766 about energy derivatives? Did it pick up the red flag that was probably waving there somewhere that no one else could see?
And that's the really interesting part is exactly that is underwriters will tell you they read the last 2 years of quarterly and annual report, plus all the reinstatement. Now, none of them are Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, which I think are potentially the only two human beings who will be able to get something out of reading these thousands of pages. So we looked at what finance quants are doing because we thought there is no way they're reading all of the reports. They don't have the time. They need to make financial decisions very quickly based on all data. And what they do is they use something called financial sentiment analysis. So financial sentiment analysis is you do a natural language processing of the documents, which means you remove all of the words that don't have meaning, that I just use to make the language flow.
That's quite good. You end up with many, many words. As a financial journalist, I can attest that there's so many nonsensical words that mean nothing. Superfluous words.
Exactly. So you're left really with, and it's fascinating. The core, what is this word? And then they categorize into 4 categories, which are negative words, positive words, litigious words, and uncertain words. And that gives you the financial sentiment. Now, what we did as well, because we had all the data on that for 20 years worth of data, we also had all the claims because all the security class actions are public. And so we've got our own database.
Able to back test things against.
Exactly.
So you're teaching this thing to learn. When it says may instead of should, then we know that's a bit less certain. And then that gives a higher probability of there being a claim or that kind of thing.
Well, no, it's actually the really interesting part is more to prove. I'm always keen to go back to underwriters and ask them, okay, so you're looking at this data. Great. Why? Because I think it's just because you've been told. But have you ever questioned? Have you ever done some correlation? Is there a high correlation between this data and the frequency? And actually what we found is we couldn't find any correlation between the number or the frequency of negative word, the frequency of positive word, the frequency of litigious word. It was just uncertainty. There was a small correlation that the more uncertain words were used in the reports, the more likely, so the more it increased the frequency. But actually comparing the correlation with which industry is the company in and what's the size of their market cap, then that was irrelevant. Knowing how many words were uncertain was absolutely irrelevant. We just proved that actually there are so little things that will tell you the chances of having a director's and officer loss. And, it's just concentrating on what really matters and then looking at the things that really, really matter. Like, did they have changed their accountants from one of the big firms to a small firm in Hawaii? That happened.
Well, certainly, yes. When you go back to Madoff, you suddenly think, oh, goodness me, it was all there staring you in the face. If only you would care to look.
Yeah.
Yes, the auditor, particularly sort of above a laundrette, a strip mall somewhere.
Well, and it's all these little things like this, exactly, that will tell you. And that is where, going back, machines are better than human at analysis. So that is why, in my view, someone reading a quarterly return or an annual return has little value. But someone looking at the results of the analysis as a human and saying, gosh, there's something really weird. Why is for this particular report, the negative words have jumped up? Then, it highlights it and you look at it. They did a survey with radiologists. The success rate of radiologists putting a cancerous cell on a radiography was relatively, well, not that high. It wasn't 99%. It was, I think, in 60s or 70%. AI was at around 90%. You combine the two together, they're 99. Why? Because AI was able to say, okay, you should look at this. This doesn't look like normal. Then the human could apply the judgment.
So it's that assistant. Do you think the best application of AI is to imagine it's a very clever multi-PhD intern who never has a hangover and works 24 hours a day?
It's the dream, right? A robot. Dream employee.
And they're presenting things to you saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Or if you say, well, I've got 10 things to do, what order should I do them in? Which one's the most likely to succeed?
Absolutely. So that is really, that application of AI is really like someone will go through all of the things that are quite repetitive, but they will be able to spot all of these anomalies that then you as an experienced underwriter will be much better place to do. So that's one side. The other side is all like the fantastic things. I mean, now in meetings, you don't even need to take notes because there's an AI robot that writes the note. Obviously, if people in attendance have a funny accent like mine, it can make for funny reading when you reread the transcripts. But, that's the kind of thing that will not only help insurance, that will help every corporation.
So we don't think underwriters are going to be out of a job or brokers out of a job anytime soon?
I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is if you as an underwriter are not a leader, then to be honest, it's not artificial intelligence that should get rid of your job. It's just common sense, normal intelligence that should say, well, we can write that on a portfolio basis with far less expenses. But if you are a leader as an underwriter, or most of the time you're a leader, and you write a very specialist line of business, I'm not talking about a very repetitive, small personal lines account, but something that requires a lot more analysis, then no, I don't think so.
It's a big year for digitizing. I mean, we've been talking about these. All powers that be would be very annoyed at me if I said big bang, but it feels like a big enough bang that's going to happen. There's certainly a lot of the old mainframe systems are going to be retired. They're going to go on the cloud, and we're going to actually properly digitize insurance. Often we kind of overestimate the short-term impact, and then we really underestimate the long-term impact. What do you think the long-term impact is going to be when we have a fully digitized marketplace for the first time?
I think hopefully there will be a reduction in expenses for...
Yeah, but certainly I've spoken to brokers who are progressive enough to think that stockbroking went to almost zero brokerage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we as brokers have to plan for a world in which that happens, that we might have to make our money other ways.
Yeah, I don't know about this because I think the jobs of broker is going to become harder and harder as you see more and
I suppose you get Robin Hood, they're being paid for deal flow, and that's the way that it works.
Yeah, so I think there's that part where it's the deal flow and it's the standard thing. I think the other part is, let's not forget, with the impact of climate change and maybe also increased value, you've got more and more properties, for instance, that are becoming uninsurable. And I think the role of the broker will always be to represent their clients and try to find solution. Now, if there is a reduction in expenses on the side of the insurer, you kind of expect that the threshold at which a type of properties or line of business become uninsurable gets higher and higher because they should have more capital to play with and be able to insure them.
Do you think you'd get rid of treaties because you won't need them? Because every individual risk will be facultatively reinsured and syndicated because there's no friction whatsoever. It could be Mittal Steel, one of the biggest property accounts in the world, but it's still, and it may involve 6,000 or 7,000 different transactions and different retros of different bits of every underwriter on that slip. But at the same time, if there's no friction, there's no friction. And does it need a treaty? Do you need a treaty if you've got 27,000 risks, but they're all automatically facultatively reinsured?
Well, no, I think it's just going to improve your arbitrage of reinsurance, isn't it? Where you say, I can have my treaty, but use more FAC. I mean, I remember when I was at Hiscox, we were told, never to use FAC because I think there was an administrative nightmare at the time.
Certainly back in the old days when everyone used to buy their own FAC. It was only when the underwriter retired that they found some old cover notes in his drawer. And they said, we could have recovered stuff that we've forgotten to recover.
Again, like going back to the benefit of a system, because it's the source of the truth and this idea that you can't override. That's another thing. Like that couldn't happen anymore if you've got the right system. So you've got the benefit of all this control and thinking that won't happen. And at the same time, if you've got the direct flow of data and it can go directly, yes, you could actually write rules that say, if it's this type of risk, then it goes directly into this FAC oblique contract. Or it could be that you've got the risk appetite of all of the potential reinsurers, and then it goes automatically there. And then no one's involved. It's done by AI. It's highly possible.
Do you think with algorithmic underwriting is going to beget algorithmic broking, one presumes?
Well, yes, I think it's moving that way, or at least as a help. We've actually built a platform for a large broker to place Lloyd's consortia in that way, whereby the follow market record their risk appetite, and then it's submitted on an aggregated basis to potential leaders. And then the potential leaders submit consortiums that they want to get placed on the Lloyd's market. The broker then bring them back to the potential followers, would then say, I want to write 5% of that one, 10% of that one, 15%. So there's still a lot of human intervention in that case. But in the future, I can really see that where it's all done automatically and say, we found the best portfolio for you according to all of your criteria. Your
sign here.
Capital requirements, sign here. Or the robot will sign on your behalf.
Yeah, it was all the sort of Amazonification. It's sort of, because you bought the bicycle pump, we think you probably want a bicycle wheel as well. Because you wrote that risk in Indonesia, that offshore energy risk, we think, you probably want this other one that's almost exactly the same.
That is where also you have to be quite careful at the moment when it's not fully automated, because the broker know full well. Brokers are much more astute than underwriters tend to give them credit for. So they've worked out that, some of the rules, that means that these follow syndicates will write something on. So for instance, if they know that they get that particular syndicate to write a line on it, then, they will automatically.
Or this one will write half of whatever they've written.
Exactly. Now, when you were a broker, how many times did you ask an underwriter for a favor?
All the time.
Exactly.
I was living on my knees, I think, most of the time.
And so algorithms don't take favors into account.
No, maybe there's a special sort of favor button.
Yeah, well, that's what we'll have to see, or try to have some kind of favor detection mechanism that says, well, actually that line was just offered as a favor, therefore it's irrelevant.
Wow, that's all for the future. Yes, you can accumulate favors. Yes, we'll have to build that into the algorithm.
Yeah.
That if it's a really good broker, it's producing 20% of your business, but 32% of your profits, they probably have generated a bit of favor there that they could use to say, here's a marginal one. Can we squeeze that in? Thank you, I'll could you write an extra 5% because I can't get it home because we know it's a bit thin. On that note, I've come to the end of all my questions, but is there anything you want to add just before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything and even a lot more than I thought we would. So it's been great conversation.
My algorithm is assessing whether I think we could have an interesting philosophical discussion about the future of insurance. And it turns out we could, because you don't fit into a standard box. There's not many underwriters who've gone out and made a technology company. I don't know of any, actually. So you're a unique guest. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you very much for having me. It was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.